say, because it's something that I prefer, is a warm or dark sound signature. Warm or dark basically means that the frequency response curve is slightly tilted clockwise. What that really means, we'll find out later on when we look at the curves, but basically it means it's a little bit more bass heavy and the treble's a little bit out of the way, but it really doesn't even have to be a lot. It can be very slight. And the opposite of that would be something that's either bright or light. But most people will say bright over light, and most people will say warm and dark interchangeably. So it's bright is different than light, I guess. But audio files, what are you going to do? So let's actually start talking about these things that make the sound. So we'll start with speakers. Obviously you know what these are. Some good ones are going to have multiple drivers. As you can see here, there's a tweeter on the top and there's a midwoofer on the bottom. Usually you're going to pair a set of speakers like this with a subwoofer that's going to be able to handle some of the other lower frequencies. Usually under 90 hertz you want to switch over to your subwoofer. That's very, very dependent on the room and stuff like that. Speakers like the ones that I'm showing here are actually powered speakers, so that means that you plug in your DAC into the speaker and that's it. It powers it for you. The amp is inside of the speaker. You don't have to worry about it at all. I prefer passive speakers. So my roommate actually has those. The ones I have don't look anything like those. So you can see the tweeter there is actually set back into that waveguide, and that waveguide actually will help those sound waves disperse better to all of the listeners, not just the person in the front. In fact, if you're sitting in front of a pair of these, it's better to sit so that they're very much to the side of you rather than in front of you. And that's true for a lot of speakers where they use a waveguide. Another interesting thing that you'll find in good speakers is going to be time-aligned drivers. That just means that the tweeter and the woofer are literally vertically aligned. So if you have the tweeter set back farther and the woofer in front, like it might look like here, then you're going to hear one sound over the other, slightly like milliseconds difference. And if you're listening for a long period of time, you will eventually hear it. Here they are going to be time-aligned. These speakers are very good speakers. They're considered to be very good value speakers at a mid-range price point. And JBL doesn't screw around for the most part. They make pretty much every good speaker you've ever heard. If I had to say like what speakers are in almost every single sort of auditorium, like I wouldn't doubt that even NPAC has JBL speakers throughout. JBL is the largest manufacturer in the world for speakers, especially in professional settings. The other thing that you're going to be interested in inside of your speakers is going to be the crossover. So the crossover is a simple circuit that's actually going to take the signal and give exactly what the tweeter needs to the tweeter and give the rest of it to the woofer. So in this case, that's a two-way crossover. You can have three-way, four-way, as many ways as you have speakers. And I'm sure Sebi's probably made a ton of these, and he's probably very good at it.
Crossover circuits?
Yeah. No? Okay. Well, so a crossover circuit, like I said, is going to split the signal, but it does so in a way that it's almost an art to actually design them for a specific speaker, where you have to actually hear and test where one hands off and the other starts to pick up. We're going to look at a graph by the end, towards the end of the presentation, where that crossover actually wasn't set properly and it's really causing some issues. So now let's get into the anatomy of how a speaker actually is driven. Some of you might know this, hopefully some of you don't, so I can actually, spend some time teaching. So basically the lowdown is that inside of the speaker, can you see my cursor? So inside the speaker, you've got a magnet and a voice coil. The voice coil is your conductor. That's where your sound inside the wire, your current from your source is going to go through. That is connected to this spider. The spider is what keeps the cone from flying about and flopping around and doing whatever it wants. That is connected to the diaphragm via connection around here. Hopefully you guys can see this. Yeah, it looks good. And the diaphragm is then connected to the surrounder on the outside. Diaphragm is just another word for cone. And when you send when you send the signal through the speaker, it's actually going to go into this voice coil, which is just a very densely wound, usually very thin copper wire, which will then actually move away from the magnet or in towards the magnet based off of the charge you're giving it at speeds and accuracy that are not achievable through actual mechanical parts moving. So that's the reason that we use this magnet and voice coil, is because if we tried to use an actual physical thing that would push and pull this diaphragm, there's no way we'd be able to do it at 20,000 times per second, which is the upper range and upper bound of the human ear's hearing. So it makes things super smooth, and we don't have to worry about any of that slow motion or any friction or anything like that. So let's see, did I miss anything here? Nope. The diaphragm is going to make your ears go, wow, that's some sound. And we'll get into a couple of other different drivers. Here's a demo of the motion. Something I want to note here is that this speaker over here is the ideal, what we would like to see out of what is called a dynamic driver. You can see that it's moving the entire driver linearly. And on the right side, if you actually look, the inside, the center part of the circle, is moving faster and more than the outside is actually moving. So on the left side, you have this ideal that doesn't actually happen with cone speakers unless you're using maybe like a really rigid cone on a subwoofer, which is not going to be moving very fast. But on the right side, you see what's actually really happening, and that's that the outside doesn't move very much and the inside moves a ton. What that means is that when you have a note that comes through and moves the driver, it actually takes some time to get that entire driver moving. And it takes a lot of amplification to actually get the entire driver to move how you want it to deliver the sound. And that's because it's connected at the diaphragm, or the diaphragm is connected at the surround. So when you're connected to the surround here, the surround is supposed to move, and when it moves exactly right, you're going to get what happens on the left here, right there, where it's perfect, the entire thing is moving back and forth. But in reality, the center is going to move, and the outside edges aren't going to move as much. And you're also going to see sound waves travel up and down the cone, and that will cause cone breakup, which we'll see some pictures of later. So when you actually want to make really high-pitched sounds, which was the top part of the speaker that we looked at, you've probably seen this a lot. It's a really weird dome. It can be made out of aluminum, it can be made out of silk, it can be made out of anything between. Most cheaper speakers will be like either a plastic, sometimes you can get silk for cheap, which is like what I prefer in my tweeters. A lot of JBL speakers use aluminum because it's very inexpensive, and rigid tweeters are actually older and more traditional than soft dome tweeters. So this was created completely by accident by somebody who took a soft fabric and stretched it over a hard dome tweeter, and then took the part away and said, oh wow, this will be a great demo unit to be able to show at my shows so that when people poke at the tweeter it doesn't crack. But it's actually more fragile, and when he showed it off, he was actually like, wow, what if I actually plug this in? And when he did, it actually worked up to 12,000 hertz, which was actually really way farther than he expected it to. And like, when you think about it, the dude made this without even thinking about like, designing it the right way. He just put some fabric over what was already there. And it worked all the way up to 12,000, which is that's only missing 1.5 or 2 octaves of the sound that we actually are going to hear. So that's actually a really good outcome from the first try. The difference being here that this voice coil is actually attached at what you would think would be where the surround would be, and the voice coil might be in the center, but they actually attach at very much the same place, and it moves the entire thing at the same time. And you can see there's an acoustic diffractor, that's right here, or acoustic deflector, in front of it. That's just the person who was playing with the tweeter really thought it was harsh and bright, and they wanted to deflect some of the sound away from the direct user. Or they're using it to diffuse the sound a little bit better, like the waveguide did. I personally hate these, and I think they feel muffled. They make the tweeter feel like it's muffled, because you're literally putting something in front of it. So, most higher end tweeters will simply make a better tweeter instead of putting this kind of a diffractor in front of it. But it's very common in older equipment.
Yeah, I've already put full paper. Everyone's thinking I'll stick right there.
Yeah, I mean, you do what you gotta do. That would absolutely take down the harshness of a tweet. So looks like we've got everything there. All right, so after speakers, the other thing you can listen on is headphones. The headphones pictured here are Odyssey, spelled really weird. LCD, these are 3s. Those headphones are probably between $2 and $3 grand. And they're made out of zebra wood and crazy magic. And I wish I could hear them, but I haven't yet. So a couple of things we're going to touch on, basically in-ear, on-ear, over-ear. We're going to touch on in-ear and we're going to touch on over-ear. On-ear is a compromise between the two for portability's sake. And mostly enthusiast headphones don't use the form factor. For the best sound, use a wire. Don't buy wireless headphones. Stop that. What they do. Maybe. Yeah, Bluetooth it's not transparent and won't be able to communicate the entire 1,300 and something samples per second that you need to be transparent, or even close to that. So, yeah.
So can you tell the difference between like I know MP3 is pretty trash, but is lossless versus lossful actually something you can distinguish between in like an audio file?
So most audiophiles will tell you yes. I personally say I can tell the difference most of the time between a 128 kilobit per second and a full lossless FLAC. But anything in between, it's really hard. And I've done a lot of testing on myself in my years, and without like proper training, it's very difficult to actually hear in a blind test the differences, unless you really know what you're looking for. Personally, I use variable bit rate AAC 256 kilobits per second files. I'm not going to touch on lossless versus lossy in the presentation. So basically what that means is that at a minimum, it uses 256,000 samples per second, and more if it needs it, to be almost transparent.